All right, back on the Young Turks. Now we're going to talk to Daniel Kleidman. He wrote Independence Day about Eric Holder and what he might or might not do in prosecuting what was considered by many people to be tortured under the Bush administration. Daniel, welcome to the Young Turks.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate you coming on. First, I want to talk a little bit about the substance of the article here. What is the sense that you got out of the Justice Department as to whether they might pursue some claims of whether this enhanced interrogation was legal or illegal?
Oh, I think that there's a very strong likelihood that they will do this. I think that there's no final decision yet, but I think it's pointing in that direction, and it's a strong inclination of the Attorney General to pursue this. You have to remember that what they're looking at is conduct that went beyond what was authorized in those Justice Department memos. So it's not the conduct that most people are familiar with, most likely waterboarding and some of the other things that were done that were controversial, but those were all methods that were permitted under the Justice Department legal opinions, and the Attorney General and the President have explicitly said that they would not prosecute anybody for conduct that was authorized. So that at least implicitly suggests that what they're looking at is conduct that went beyond that, and so things that we may not even know about, things that have not been publicly disclosed.
But that's very important, though, because, I mean, if they're going after people who went outside of the memos, that doesn't seem very controversial at all. Presumably, they should have been doing that all along, right? I mean, on the other hand, if they're going to go after the people who wrote the memos I got the impression that they were going to consider, hey, were these memos legal, and if they weren't, what should be done about it? No,
that's not. There's a separate investigation by the Justice Department's Internal Watchdog Unit, the Office of Professional Responsibility, that's looking at the conduct of Justice Department lawyers who issued those legal opinions and whether they violated their professional responsibility as lawyers by authorizing some of that behavior. But that is not a criminal investigation. It's a separate investigation, and it is not what Attorney General Holder is talking about. He's talking about conduct that was not authorized by those memos, and much of this conduct was, I suspect, I don't know this for sure, but I strongly suspect, was reviewed by the previous administration, and they made determinations not to investigate further or to prosecute. And now this Justice Department is looking at all of that behavior and putting it under legal scrutiny again, and I think we'll come to a very different conclusion. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Dan, I got to ask, then I don't understand what the big deal is, because if they go after lower level guys, why is that a political issue? Because the context of
who said it was lower? I mean, I didn't say it was entirely lower level guys. You begin an investigation, and you don't know for sure where it takes you. It is possible that CIA interrogators did some pretty bad things that violate the torture statute, but they were approved. I say possible because I don't know this, but they were approved by people way up the chain of command.
So that's the issue.
In which case, those people, in which case, those people would be exposed potentially to criminal prosecution.
See, I don't see this being a large issue and it getting the coverage that it did if Holder's plan is to go only after low-level guys. He must then think that this is going to lead higher and higher. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any conflict about this at all. It'd be the easiest thing in the world.
I don't know if he thinks that it's going to lead higher and higher. I think he thinks that that's a possibility, and they will pursue this, and wherever the facts lead them.
Mm-hmm. And
you can't. It's a fairly fairly well-established legal doctrine that if lower-level, government people in the government are acting on the basis of legal opinions that they're being given by the Justice Department, you just can't prosecute them. The Justice Department is telling them this is legal, and if they did it based on those opinions, you could try to make a case, but it would be a very difficult case to bring.
Yeah,
it's almost an absolute defense.
Yeah, I don't think so. But I hear what you're saying. Don't get me wrong.
That is true.
No. Look, it's much harder. No question about that. So that's the part I absolutely agree with you on. But obviously you could. And why do I say it's obvious? Because what if John Yoo wrote a memo saying, take their heads off, literally? Then obviously if you follow that order, you followed an illegal order, and we could prosecute you for that. Now, so taking their head off is illegal. So I'm just using an extreme example here so that we're clear that obviously you can go after him for something. If he says take their fingernails out, well, that seems pretty clear too. But if he says dunk their head in the water and drown them until they're nearly dead, but if they don't have organ failure, then it's okay. Well, that doesn't seem that unclear either. Do you see my point?
Yeah.
So I think there's a case to be made there. And the reason why your story is so interesting is because are they going to make that case? So let's get to how you got this story a little bit, because I think it's relevant to the story. You have 4 sources from the Justice Department that looks to me like a coordinated leak. It looks like they're doing a trial balloon here to see if there's popular support behind it. Can you see how I would draw that conclusion?
Yeah. Is it free to draw that conclusion? I don't believe that's the case, though.
That's interesting. Why not?
Because I spent 3 months reporting the story, and if you read the story carefully, you see the evolution of the Attorney General and his staff's thinking about this, and it's not like, at the last second they sort of whimsically said, well, let's see how this flies. We'll leak it to a reporter, and then on the basis of that we'll make a decision. They spent a long time looking at the record, studying the statute, the relevant statutes, and drawing some conclusions. There's no final decision here as to whether to go ahead, because they just don't. The process is not finished.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. I would never say that it was whimsical, but it seems to me that there was something curious about them saying, we really think we're going to go in this direction, but we haven't quite made up our mind yet. And you mentioned throughout.
I had a deadline, right? I had to write my story. Would have been great if I could have written the story when the decision had been completely made. But have you ever worked in government?
No. Well, briefly during a summer, but I wouldn't really count that.
Well, particularly in a place like the Justice Department, they're cautious, and they take a long time to make tough decisions.
So Dan, let me go to that then. Because you mentioned in the article too, and it's a really interesting article. Obviously you can find it on Newsweek.com, and we got a link up to it at theyoungturks.com. You mentioned that they are at least aware of politics, right? And that Rahm Emanuel doesn't seem to be that thrilled about this idea. How real is that? Because some will say, "Hey, wait a minute."
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. How what?
How real is that? Because some people will say, "Oh, look, they're playing a game here, where Rahm Emanuel and Barack Obama appear to be against it, and they go, oh, what could we do? Holder had to do what he had to do." That's one theory. The other theory is, no, really, Obama doesn't want any of these prosecutions, and he's going to get pissed at Holder if he doesn't.
Yeah. Well, it's a good point, because there is you could reasonably think that the way this has emerged is actually works well for the White House, because on the one hand, they're widely believed to not be enthusiastic about this investigation, and that covers them on their right flank. On the other hand, their administration is likely going to do this because there's an independent attorney general who's made this decision, and that covers them on their left flank. And so, that's not an unreasonable theory. On the other hand, this president has been so consistent about his stated views anyway that he doesn't want to look backwards. He wants to move forward, and it is also the case that an investigation like this, would very quickly, I think, become contentious and politicized. And I think it's also sort of beyond doubt that the president's real priority right now are his domestic agenda, particularly health care and also energy. And so I tend to think that they would rather that this not happen. On the other hand, the last thing they're going to do is interfere with their attorney general and be accused of politicizing the Justice Department, because that's not going to get them anywhere.
We're talking to Daniel Kleidman from Newsweek. He wrote Independence Day, this major story on Eric Holder and what he might charges he might pursue. Finally, Dan, in talking to them, did you get a sense of, hey, if we don't do anything here, that we might be establishing precedent, that you can, that you can do all these things, whether it's things that are outside the memo or even the terrible things that were inside the memo, and if we don't prosecute, then we have a case that you just call it a political dispute and you do anything you like the next time you have a different president.
Right. It's a good point. No one explicitly said that to me, but it does go to the previous thing that we were talking about. The suggestion that this could be a trial balloon. They put themselves in a very tough spot if this is out there, that they're seriously considering doing this, leaning toward doing it, and then they don't. Imagine, not that this is necessarily a paramount consideration for them, but once you strongly suggest that you're going to do this and then you don't, it raises all sorts of questions, and then over time, the specific things that they were looking at leak, and then the question is, well, why didn't you investigate it? And then people start raising, questions about, cover-ups and, whatever else. So I think that you would not put this information out lightly, given what the reaction would be if they don't, either investigate or lay out a very strong case for why they didn't investigate.
All right, Dan Kleidman from Newsweek, really interesting piece, and we really appreciate you joining us on the Young Turks.
Sure, anytime.